and let yourself drift back through the velvet folds of time, to a world quieter than ours, a world of soft footfalls on damp earth, of distant bells echoing through the hills, of silence thick with meaning. Let me carry you there, gently, to a time when firelight danced in every home, and stars were the only watchful eyes in the night sky, a time when the wind whispered truths, and the shadows carried stories. Tonight we walk together, down narrow, winding streets of stone, where ivy clings to the walls of crumbling cottages, and candles flicker behind tiny, frost-blurred windows. This is medieval Europe, a place not just of history, but of memory and mystery, where the veil between the world of the living and the unseen beyond was thought to be as thin as breath on a mirror. In those distant days, when the world was lit only by flame and starlight, people saw the world differently, not through science or reason, but through signs, through whispers, through dreams. They believed the universe spoke, not in words, but in symbols, in patterns, in omens. And they listened. They watched the flight of birds. They paid attention to the curl of smoke. They read the way bread cracked in the oven, or how a dog howled at the moon, because they knew dash. That meaning lived in the smallest things. Protection could be found, not just in walls or swords, but in a sprig of rosemary hung by the door, in a silver coin tucked under a baby's pillow, in a whispered charm before bedtime. And wisdom, it lived in the quiet corners of every home, passed down from grandmother to granddaughter, from father to son. Not in books, but in gestures, in recipes, in lullabies. Old knowledge, old comfort, like precious heirlooms wrapped in velvet cloth, tender, worn soft by time. Tonight, I want to share some of these gentle mysteries with you, these quiet superstitions that once lit the dark. Each one, a flicker of hope, a whisper against fear, a candle held out to the unknown. Let me tell you, not of monsters or battles or kings, but of the soft human ways people tried to feel safe, to feel seen, to feel held in a world full of uncertainty. Because superstition isn't always fear. Sometimes it's love. A mother tying red thread around her child's wrist. A farmer burying an iron nail at the edge of his field. A girl walking backwards 3 steps before bed, just in case it helps her dream of the one she'll marry. These are not foolish things. They are tender things. Small rituals, gentle gestures, little anchors in a world that often felt too big. So rest now, dear listener. Let your breath slow. Let the day fall away. And I will take your hand and lead you softly, gently, through a world of forgotten wonder, one superstition at a time, one story, one flame at a time. A small village, nestled deep in the folds of a quiet valley, where morning fog clings low to the ground, settling over fields and fences like a soft woolen blanket. Everything here moves slowly, as though the very air resists hurry, as though time itself has decided to rest a while. The houses are made of thick, weathered stone, their roofs sloped low, their chimneys breathing out gentle curls of smoke. Windows glow with the amber hush of firelight, casting golden shapes that flicker against the creeping twilight. This is where our story begins. Not in a castle, not in a city of kings or scholars, but in a quiet place where the old ways still live and belief is stitched into the fabric of daily life. In the largest cottage at the edge of the village, where the stone walls hold stories in their silence, an old woman named Margot sits beside her hearth. Her hands worn smooth by years of kneading dough, of gathering herbs, of tucking children into bed, rest quietly in her lap. Her eyes, bright and clear even in her 7th decade, hold the kind of knowing that only time can teach. Beside her, a small child sleeps, cheek pressed to a wool-stuffed cushion, breath slow and steady. All is still, until Margot's gaze, absent-minded and drifting, catches the flicker of movement outside her window. Just a figure passing by. A man in a brown wool cloak. Nothing unusual at first glance. And yet, as their eyes met, just for a breath, she felt it. That sudden, unshakable chill, a tightening in her chest, as if something unseen had reached out and touched her. Her breath catches. The evil eye, she whispers to herself, softly, carefully, as though the name alone could stir the air around her. Her fingers, by instinct alone, move to the iron charm that hangs from a leather cord at her neck. She grips it gently, feeling its cool weight. That cold in the air, that strange heaviness, it wasn't new to her. She has known it before. You see, in Margot's world, the evil eye is not simply a story told to frighten children. It is a quiet truth, passed from lips to ears over steaming bowls of soup, whispered in prayer, etched into charms hidden in clothing hems. It's not always malice that invites the curse. Sometimes it's simply longing. A neighbor admiring your healthy child just a little too long, a traveler pausing beside your garden, eyes lingering on the ripeness of your vegetables. Even a friend, meaning well, speaking again and again of your good fortune. That was all it took. The eye didn't wound with a sword. It wilted plants, soured milk, invited fevers, and unsettled dreams. It was a shadow you could not see, but one that could still touch everything you held dear. Margot stands, slowly, her joints whispering their protest in the quiet. She wraps a shawl tighter around her shoulders and moves to the corner of her kitchen. There, on a high shelf, beneath a bundle of dried rosemary and elderflower, sits a small wooden box. Smooth from age, worn by hands no longer here. Inside, resting in a fold of cloth, is a bottle no bigger than a thumb. Glass darkened slightly by time. Inside it, bent nails, thorns, and a few sacred drops of old red wine. Her witch bottle, her guardian. This bottle was not something bought or sold, it was made dash. Lovingly, patiently, by her own mother, long ago when they first came to this valley. It had followed them through every season since. Witch bottles were not spoken of openly. They lived in the quiet spaces, beneath doorsteps, inside walls hidden at the back of chimney stacks, filled with the cast-off pieces of daily life, pins, needles, nail clippings, a strand of hair, even sometimes a drop of blood or tear water. The most intimate pieces of one's being sealed away in silence to form a barrier against unseen harm. A trap, not for people but for ill intentions. A net to catch envy, to turn back any curse before it could take root. As Margot holds the little bottle close to her chest, her fingers wrap around its warmth. The fire crackles softly behind her, and the shadows on the wall stretch longer. She thinks of her daughter, now grown, living 3 villages away. Did she remember to hang iron above her door? Margot wonders. Did she whisper the old words when her baby was born? The air tonight feels strange. Not evil, perhaps, but different, thick with something unnamed, as though the wind is watching. And Margot, with all her years and all her knowing, is grateful. So very grateful. For the little things. The small protections. The rituals done with love. Because in this world of unseen tides and ancient shadows, sometimes it's the tiniest flame that keeps the night at bay. Dawn comes slowly to the valley. Not all at once, but like a shy child peeking through a doorway. Curious, hesitant, tiptoeing across the fields on bare feet. Mist still lingers in the hollows, hugging the ground like a memory that refuses to leave. Smoke rises from crooked chimneys, curling upward in sleepy spirals. As fires are rekindled and shutters creak open to welcome the pale gold of morning. The village stirs, rubbing its eyes, shaking off the hush of night. But in the cottage at the edge of the village, young Thomas is already awake. He lies still beneath a woolen blanket, his eyes fixed on the beams above him, dark wood stretched like ribs across the ceiling. He listens to the sounds of waking. A rooster in the distance, the murmur of his mother stoking the hearth. But he does not move, because something from the night before still clings to him, like smoke in his lungs, like a question unanswered. He'd been returning from the market, a long day spent haggling and trading, selling his father's finest wool to strangers with strange accents. His pockets had been heavy with coin, his heart light with pride. The moon was already high when he reached the stone bridge. The path was quiet, the air cold, just the sound of his boots crunching on gravel, and the gentle hush of the river below. And then, from the shadows it emerged. A black cat, so dark it seemed not to reflect light at all, as if it had been carved from the night itself. Its coat shimmered faintly with damp, and its eyes, oh, its eyes, gleamed green as forest glass, steady and strange. They regarded one another in silence. Thomas on one side of the path, the cat on the other, neither moving, and then, with perfect grace, with a kind of eerie deliberateness, the cat rose, arched its back, and walked directly across his path, its tail held high, its steps slow and purposeful, as if it knew what it was doing. And Thomas, his heart clenched tight, watched it vanish into the dark. He stood there for a long while, frozen, his breath clouding in the cold air, his thoughts tangled like brambles. Because everyone knew, everyone, a black cat crossing your path, especially at night, especially when you're alone, was a harbinger of misfortune. The oldest women in the village whispered of it over their spinning wheels. Children learned it before they learned their prayers. Even the priest, though he might scoff in daylight, would mutter a blessing if one darted past the church steps. Black cats were not just animals, they were watchers, messengers, familiars of witches, or witches themselves cloaked in fur. It was said that their midnight coats made them invisible to spirits, perfect for slipping between the worlds. That when they crossed your path, they marked you dash, left behind a trace, a thread of otherworldly attention. That misfortune could follow like a scent. Thomas had nearly turned back. He had considered the long road through the forest, even though it was rougher, colder, lonelier. But the pull of home, of the warm hearth, of stew bubbling on the fire, of his young wife waiting beneath blankets, was too strong. So he walked on, heart uneasy, eyes scanning the dark, and now, morning. He lies in bed, the coins from his market day tucked safely in a leather pouch, but they feel heavy now, not with pride, but with uncertainty. What will the cat bring? A blight upon the barley, a fever in the lambs? Will his wife, sweet and smiling just yesterday, wake with shadowed eyes and trembling hands? He doesn't know. That's the worst part, not knowing. The fear doesn't come with thunder, it comes like water, slowly rising invisible until your feet are no longer touching the ground. And so, as the day begins, Thomas finds himself whispering the old words under his breath, the half-remembered charms, the lines his grandmother used to say when the wind changed direction. He considers tossing salt over his shoulder, placing his boots backwards at the door, tying iron keys above the window frame, small things, old things. But maybe they help. Maybe the cat has already moved on. Maybe the market left was only a brush of wind. Or maybe it watches still from beneath some hedgerow, green eyes unblinking in the dew-silvered grass. Either way, Thomas rises. He steps into the day with careful feet, and in his heart, quiet and trembling, he carries an old truth, that sometimes all you can do is believe in your own small power, in a whispered charm, in a gesture of protection, in a world full of unseen paths. That may be enough. Down the lane from Thomas's cottage, where ivy climbs the stone walls and chickens cluck softly in their coops, stands the village bakery, its wooden door swollen with age, its windows always fogged with warmth. Usually, by this hour, the scent of fresh bread fills the air, thick and golden and comforting, like memory itself. And usually the baker's wife, Marie, moves with easy grace between oven and table, her hands knowing each motion by heart. But not today. Today Marie stands still, utterly still. A dusting of flour clings to her apron, and her eyes, those kind, work-worn eyes, are wide with something quieter than fear, but deeper. She stares at a single loaf on the counter before her, still warm, still smelling of butter and yeast and morning. But in its center, where there should be softness, a golden swell of perfectly baked dough, there is a hole, not a tear, not a bubble, but a perfect round void, clean and strange, as though a thumb, unseen, had pressed into its heart and taken something away. Marie's hands tremble. She sets the loaf aside with the gentleness one might use for a newborn or a relic, something sacred or cursed, because she knows. She knows what her mother told her long ago in the low kitchen of their childhood home, a place of braided garlic and drying herbs, of stories murmured over bread dough. A hole in the bread means death is near, not always today, not even this week, but soon. Close enough to feel its breath in the corners of the room, close enough to listen. Bread is not just food in Marie's world. It is life. It is the center of the home, kneaded with prayers, shared with care, broken between hands in times of joy and sorrow alike. And bread, when it speaks, does not lie. Dough that won't rise, crust that burns for no reason, loaves that split or sag or bear strange marks. These are messages dash dash, omens wrapped in linen, warnings shaped in the ovens of old kitchens. Marie thinks now of her family, of her mother, whose steps have grown smaller with each passing winter, of her youngest son, who has been coughing since the rains came, that deep, chesty cough that lingers like fog. She thinks of Henri, her husband, whose hands are always rough with work, who forgets his own meals in his worry for theirs. And she thinks too of herself, so tired, always tired. Her days stitched together with pre-dawn hours and late-night tending. In this life, this village life where winter can be cruel, and fever is no small thing. Death is never far. It's not something dramatic, not thunder and shadow. It's quiet, like forgetting to breathe, like bread that doesn't rise. Marie wraps the loaf in a cloth, gently, lovingly, as if it were something alive, or something that once was. She carries it to the back of the shop, where the shadows are deeper, and the old bread bin stands beneath the stairs. She will dispose of it quietly, without letting Henri see. There is no need to frighten him, no need to speak aloud. What superstition has already whispered to her heart, saying it might make it stronger, might give it shape, weight, teeth. Better to act gently, to watch, to wait, to hope the bread is mistaken this time, but still, she will do what she can. She will light candles at the church, extra ones, even if it costs her more than she can spare. She will add herbs to their broth tonight, the ones for warding, for strength. She will hold her boy a little longer when he naps. She will press her ear gently to his chest when no one is looking, listening for the rhythm of life. And she will whisper a blessing over every new loaf that enters the oven. Because in this world, where signs and omens are stitched into every corner of daily life, where the sacred hides in flour and flame, only a fool ignores the miracles that come disguised as warnings. Only a fool forgets. That bread can speak. As the sun climbs higher above the village, casting gold-tipped shadows that stretch like fingers across the cobbled paths, the world seems to exhale, slowly, quietly, as though it too is grieving. At the far end of the lane, behind a low stone wall veiled in ivy and creeping thyme, a small cottage sits in stillness. Its curtains remain drawn. The hearth flickers, but low. A pale glow, more for comfort than warmth. This is the home of Peter the carpenter, a man whose hands, though rough and worn with work, once traced the curve of his wife's face, with more reverence than he ever gave wood or nails. For 40 years, his life and Margaret's had wound together, like threads in a tapestry, colored by seasons, softened by time, and now she is gone. Gone in the soft hush of night. Her breath had grown quiet, slower, lighter, until it simply stopped. There had been no struggle, no cry, just the sigh of a candle that has burned itself out. The neighbors came, and as neighbors do, bringing broth, bread, and silence. No one dares speak too loudly in the house of the newly grieving. Words become heavy things. Even footsteps tread lighter. Some helped fetch water, others stoked the fire. One kind soul tended to the body, preparing Margaret's still form for burial with linen and lavender. But Peter saw only shadows. He moved slowly through the house, his limbs remembering purpose even when his heart could not. He had one task, one duty to perform before anything else could be done. He must cover the mirrors, all of them, not out of vanity or superstition alone, but out of something deeper, older. A sacred kind of knowing passed from one generation to the next, in whispered stories and firelight warnings. Mirrors, it is said, can trap a soul. In the thin hours after death, when the spirit has not yet fully let go of the body, it can drift, uncertain, confused. A glance back, a glimpse of its own reflection in a looking glass. And it might linger, it might cling, it might become caught. Unable to pass on, restless, anchored to the place it once called home, Peter remembers the old tales. Tales of reflections that blinked when the room was still, of glass that fogged for no reason, of images seen where no one stood. So he gathers the cloths, folded years ago, placed in the drawer beneath the stairs. Just in case, Margaret used to say. He unwraps the black linen, worn but clean, soft from age, and he begins. In the bedroom, he covers the tall mirror she used each morning, pinning up her hair, smoothing her apron, sometimes laughing at the creases in her cheeks. He smooths the cloth over it now with trembling hands. The laughter still echoes in the wood. In the hall, a small round mirror, just above the table where they used to keep fresh flowers. He covers that too. Even the polished copper plate by the door, not truly a mirror, but shiny enough to catch a passing soul, receives its own veil. Each mirror, each surface that might reflect, is tenderly hidden, not rushed, not out of fear, but with love, with reverence, with the knowledge that this ritual, however simple, might be the last gift he can give her. With each cloth, he whispers her name, and then a blessing. Soft, clumsy words, not poetry, not prayer, but true. A man's heart speaking to the place where his wife once was, and maybe still is. The house, wrapped in shadows and cloth, feels quieter now, more solemn, more protected. Peter sits beside the hearth, hands in his lap, staring into the low flame. He doesn't cry, his grief is not loud, it pools within him like deep water. But somewhere in the hush, he hopes that Margaret, his beloved, is walking gently toward the light, unburdened, untrapped, free. And he hopes the mirrors will hold nothing of her. No echo, no glimmer, only emptiness and peace. The snail's secret extended. Later that day, as the bells from the church toll softly across the damp green valley, a gentle rain begins to fall. Not a storm, not a downpour, but a silver mist drifting from the sky like breath, cool and clean. It touches leaves like fingers, it kisses rooftops, trickles down stone walls, and hangs in glistening beads on the threads of spiderwebs stretched between branches. In the garden behind the weaver's cottage, young Anna walks barefoot among the vegetables. The path is soft beneath her feet, the earth drinking in the rain with quiet joy. Anna's shawl clings to her shoulders, her hair is damp, darkened by the mist, but she doesn't mind. Today she is searching, not for food, not for weeds, but for something rare and delicate. She walks slowly, scanning the ground, and then she sees it. A snail shell, empty, perfect. Its spiral glistens with rain, nestled beside the base of a cabbage stalk. She crouches and lifts it carefully, holding it in her palm like an offering. The pattern draws her in. The curling path inward and inward, from wide to tight. Her grandmother once told her, this is the pattern of protection, of sacred geometry. The same found in sunflowers, pine cones, and the whorls of your own fingerprint. It is how the universe remembers itself. Snail shells, she said, are not just homes. They are wards, amulets. They hold the memory of safety, the imprint of shelter. When dried and crushed, mixed with thyme and rosemary, they can be burned to protect a home from disease. When strung into garlands, they keep away envy and ill intent. When kept whole and close to the skin, they guard against heartbreak. Anna slips the shell into her pocket, where it rests against her heart. She finds another, and another. By the time she finishes, her apron is heavy with tiny spirals, tokens of wisdom left behind by soft-bodied creatures. who knew how to carry safety wherever they went. Anna is to be married in 4 weeks. The preparations have begun. The weaving of her wedding cloak, the brewing of mead, the gathering of herbs for blessings. But this part, this quiet collection, feels more sacred than all the rest. She plans to tuck the shells into the corners of her new home. One in the pantry, one under the mattress, one buried beneath the hearthstone. Each one a small secret promise. You are safe here. You are loved here. The rain begins to fall harder, drumming softly on cabbage leaves, singing against the stones. Anna pulls her shawl tighter and walks back toward the cottage, the garden behind her gleaming, full of tiny trails and ancient magic. Inside, she lays the shells in a shallow wooden bowl. They glimmer in the candlelight, soft and pale, almost whispering. And she smiles, because in this old village, where bread speaks and mirrors must be veiled, and the wind sometimes carries secrets, even the smallest creature can teach you how to live wisely, how to carry home in your heart, how to protect what matters, with nothing more than patience, pattern, and love, deep in the forest that borders the village, beyond the last grazing field, and the mossy stone where children sometimes dare to sit and whisper, there is a place where time does not pass, as it does in the world of men. Here, beneath the ancient oaks, trees so old their roots seem to dream, the forest grows thick and close, branches weave together overhead, like the rafters of a great cathedral, shutting out all but the softest beams of sun. Even the birds grow quiet here, even the wind walks softly. And in this hush, in this green and sacred stillness, there lies a ring, a perfect circle of mushrooms, small, brown, unremarkable in themselves, growing in a ring no more than 20 feet across. It has always been there, always, before the village was built, before the path to the river was carved, before the chapel's bell first rang. The old ones say it was here when their grandmothers were girls, and that it will remain, long after our own names are forgotten. The villagers call it simply the fairy ring, and though many laugh at such tales in daylight, no one steps inside it, not even the bravest woodsman, not even the foolhardy drunk after a festival night, because every child in the village has been told the same thing. Never walk into the circle, never disturb its stillness, never mock the old magic, for it hears you, and it remembers. It is said that the fair folk dance here, on moonlit nights, when the silver light pools like milk on the moss, when the stars blink slowly as if watching. They gather, not seen but felt. A hush in the branches, a flicker of movement, a strange note in the air, like music played on glass. And if you are foolish enough to step into that perfect circle, to cross the unseen threshold into their world, you may never come back. Or worse, you may come back changed, for a night spent dancing with the fair folk may stretch across 100 human years. And when you return, your home is a ruin, your family is gone, your village has turned to dust. You are a stranger in the world that once knew your name. And the fairies, they never explain, they never weep, they only dance. Long ago, when the trees were still shorter and the village was young, a boy named Willem wandered too far into the woods. He was chasing a butterfly, a bright-winged thing, glowing blue and gold in the sunlight. He followed it, past the rabbit trail, past the fallen log shaped like a curled finger, past even the place where the brambles grow thick and no one picks berries. And there, in the quiet shade, he saw it. The ring, perfect, moss-lined. Still, it drew his eyes like a magnet draws iron. The mushrooms weren't grand. They were ordinary, short, brown, slightly frilled at the edges. But the way they grew, the way the light seemed different inside the circle. Soft, golden, touched with colors that had no name. That was not ordinary. Willem stepped closer and closer. He heard something dash, not with his ears exactly, but in his bones. A faint strain of music, high, sweet, wild. It called to him, and just as he lifted his foot, as if to step into the ring, a hand seized his arm, rough, strong, terrified. It was his grandmother. She had followed him. sensing something wrong in her marrow, drawn by that same pull. But tempered by wisdom, by age, by knowing, she yanked him back so sharply he fell into her arms, and then she scolded him. But her voice shook, not from anger, from fear. That night, with her voice low and the fire crackling behind her, she told him stories of children who stepped into rings and came back grey-haired, of men who vanished on their way to cut wood and returned with strange eyes and no memory, of women who heard laughter in the trees and followed it too far. And from that day on, Willem remembered. Now he is a man, married, with children of his own. His hair is beginning to grey at the temples, but when he walks in the woods, he still avoids the ring. And he teaches his children what his grandmother taught him: to bow to the ring when they pass, to whisper thanks to the old magic, to leave bread or milk at its edge when the moon is full, or a dream has unsettled the night. He does not speak of fear, he speaks of respect. For some, magic is not cruel, only wild. And wild things must not be trespassed upon. Sometimes, when he brings his children to the ring, they look inside it and shiver. They say the colors are strange in there, that it feels quieter somehow, that they hear bells no one else hears. Willem only nods. He has heard them too. The ring never fades. Even when snow covers the forest floor, its outline remains, unbroken, eternal, and sometimes on nights when the stars are sharp and the moon is heavy with silver light, the villagers say they can hear music. Faint, distant, a pipe maybe, a drum made from something not quite wood, a laugh that has no throat, and always dancing, not loud, not frantic, just the soft patter of feet on moss, as if someone, or some many, are moving in time with something older than the stars. The villagers lock their doors on such nights. They light candles. They place bowls of cream on their doorsteps. And they do not speak the names of the fair folk, not out of terror, out of respect, because magic still lives in the world, not the kind in books, not the kind you summon, but the kind that waits, watches, remembers. And in the heart of the forest, beneath the oaks that remember the beginning of the world, the fairy ring still pulses quietly in the earth. As evening deepens and the first stars blink awake, in the vast velvet sky, a hush settles over the valley. The birds are quiet now, their songs traded for silence. The sheep have curled into soft hills of wool, the hearths are aglow behind shuttered windows, and the last tendrils of wood smoke drift lazily into the cooling air. We find ourselves now at the edge of the village, where a narrow footpath winds between hedgerows and leads to a small ivy-draped cottage half hidden by climbing roses. This is the home of Elena, the herb woman. Some call her healer. Some, whispering behind hands, call her witch. But all come to her door when fevers burn too long, when infants cry for reasons no one can name, when crops fail for the third year in a row. Her hands are brown and knotted like tree roots, her back slightly bowed from years bent over beds, kneeling at streams, gathering blossoms at dawn. She knows the language of leaves. She listens to what seeds whisper before they sprout. And tonight, though her hearth is warm and the shutters latch tight, Eleanor feels the prickle of unease. She works at her wooden table under candlelight, grinding dried nettle into powder, mixing crushed yarrow with honey thick as gold. But her thoughts are far from medicine. Something is stirring. She's heard the signs: milk spoiling overnight, though it was fresh that morning, children waking at once, from different homes, with eyes wide and hands trembling, unable to speak of what they saw in their dreams. Chickens silent in their nests, their eggs unlaid, their feathers fluffed with worry. The villagers call them small things. Coincidence, perhaps. Strange weather, the mischief of a neighbor's cat. But Eleanor knows better. She has lived too long and seen too much to ignore the old warnings. Such things are footprints, left behind by something unseen. Not wild animals, not men, but workings, curses, ill wishes cast in secret, whispers made potent by envy and malice. She closes her mortar slowly, the dried leaves inside fall silent. Then she moves to the kitchen door, her candle casting long shadows along the floor. Just beside the doorframe sits a small linen sack tied shut with red thread. Eleanor unties it gently and pours a portion of its contents into her hand. Salt, not ordinary salt, not the coarse grey kind used for meat. This is white and fine, gleaming in the candlelight like ground stars. It was blessed by the village priest during the harvest festival last autumn, and even he, in his crisp robes and gentle voice, had lingered longer than usual when offering the blessing. For he too understood, salt is sacred, older than scripture, older than the village, older than the roads that brought the first people here. It is the sea, dried and held in your palm. It is the breath of earth's bones, drawn up through deep stone, and gifted to the living. It preserves, it cleanses, it seals, and, when placed with intention, it protects. Elena kneels at her doorstep and begins to pour a thin, careful line across the threshold. Not too fast, not too thick. She hums as she works, a tune without words, a melody she remembers from her grandmother's kitchen long ago when she was just a girl, watching wise fingers trace white circles across windowsills. The salt falls like snowfall, soft, precise, powerful. She draws a second line along the windowsill, then one beneath the chimney's grate, and finally she sprinkles a small handful into the hearth's embers, where it hisses softly. Not in protest, but in blessing. She feels it then. The air shift, a faint warmth along the edges of her spine, as though something ancient and unseen has stirred in approval. Salt, she thinks, is not just matter. It is memory, the memory of safety, the memory of long-gone mothers, wrapping shawls tighter, as they told their daughters, always bless the door, always trust the salt. She steps back to admire her work, but not with pride, with reverence, because this is not her power, not hers alone. It belongs to all the women before her, the ones who gathered sea salt in baskets made of reed, the ones who stitched it into their hems. So no curse could cling to them. It is their wisdom that lives in this line of white. And tonight, as the world turns slowly under the stars, that wisdom holds. Elena returns to her table. She pours herself a cup of warm elderflower tea and watches the candlelight flicker gently on the salt. She knows that something walks in the dark tonight, a shadow with no feet, a malice with no name, but it will not cross her threshold. The salt will hold, and as she sips her tea, wrapped in shawls and starlight, she feels sleep coming gently, like mist over the meadows. Outside, the wind rustles the leaves, the owls call softly from the trees, the morning sun rises pale and thin, its golden light filtering through a veil of mist. That clings stubbornly to the rooftops and tree branches. The village wakes slowly, sleep still clinging to its bones. Bells chime softly at the chapel tower, and the scent of fresh bread and morning fires drifts through the cobbled streets. It feels like an ordinary day. But something is not quite right. You can sense it in the way the birds pause between calls, in the way the dogs refuse to bark, in the way the people speak in hushed tones, as if afraid their words might summon something they cannot name. Word spreads quickly. At the heart of it is Marcus, the blacksmith's young apprentice, all broad shoulders and soot-streaked cheeks, usually steady, usually strong. But this morning his face is pale beneath the grime, his hands shaking ever so slightly, as he recounts what he saw on the road from the lower woods. He tells it 3 times dash, once to his master, then again to the baker's wife, and finally to a small circle of villagers in the market square. Each time the telling grows slower, as if the memory saps the strength from his voice. He speaks of a stranger, a man cloaked in wool, hood drawn low, walking alone along the eastern path just as the sun broke the horizon. Nothing seemed wrong at first, but then the man extended his left hand in greeting. Not his right, his left. And everything changed. There was a stillness in the air, Marcus says. The birds had gone quiet. Even the insects had ceased their buzzing. The stranger's smile was crooked, not joyful, but eerie. It pulled only at the left corner of his mouth, and one eye, the left one, gleamed strangely, as though it had caught the light, not from the sun, but from something colder, deeper, far beneath the earth. He walked with a limp, his weight favoring the left side. Every gesture came from his left arm, pointing, waving, touching the strap of his bag. And Marcus, brave as he is, felt fear coil in his belly like a cold serpent. He did not shake the man's hand. He stepped aside, murmured a quiet prayer, and turned back before reaching the village gates. By the time he looked again, the man had vanished. No sound of footsteps, no echo of farewell, just mist. When the villagers hear this story, a quiet dread settles over them. Some cross themselves, others clutch their shawls tighter across their shoulders, a few whisper old prayers beneath their breath. Ones their grandmothers taught them to keep the shadows at bay. Because they know the stories. The left side has always been watched with suspicion. It is the side from which evil comes. The sinister side. And yes, that word itself comes from Latin, where sinistra meant not just left, but unlucky, unholy, ominous. In the old stories, witches cast their spells with their left hands. The devil whispers into left ears. And when Judgment Day comes, it is said the damned will be gathered at the Lord's left, while the blessed stand safely on the right. Left-handedness, though harmless in truth, was long feared in such villages. Children who favored their left were corrected. Their spoons shifted, their hands tied gently, not out of cruelty, but fear of what it might mean. For generations, the left side was the shadow side, a mirror's twin, the hidden crooked path, where danger might walk unseen. When Father Benedict, the village priest, hears Marcus's tale, he grows very quiet. The lines around his eyes deepen, his brow furrows not in disbelief, but in recognition. He has seen such signs before, and though he has worn the priest's collar for over 30 years, has stood calmly at many gravesides, has baptized babes and blessed fields, and tended to souls, there are still moments, rare, unsettling moments, when something old and dark brushes against the world he guards. He gathers the villagers in the square. His voice is low but steady. He reminds them that the left is not to be trusted, that throughout scripture and story, light comes from the right dash, and temptation from the left. The goat stands to the left of the shepherd. The thief on the cross to Christ's left mocked him, while the one on the right asked for mercy. He urges the people to be vigilant, to notice who favors their left hand, who gestures too much with their left side, who walks with a crooked step or casts sidelong glances from their left eye. He speaks not of hatred, but of protection. He gives each family a vial of holy water and tells them to anoint their doorposts with the sign of the cross. Starting from the right, he asks them to recite the morning blessing before sunrise and to sleep with a candle lit. If their dreams grow restless, the stranger may have left the road, but the echo of his presence remains. Like footprints left in frost, like the chill that lingers even after the door is shut. As the villagers return to their homes, their steps are quieter. They glance over their shoulders more often. They tuck their children in with gentler hands. They place iron shears under pillows, draw crosses on their thresholds with chalk and ash, and whisper blessings to the right side of their bodies as they lay down to sleep. They know that not all evil arrives in great storms or plagues. Sometimes it comes quietly, wrapped in wool, offering its left hand. In the eastern corner of the village, where the river bends like a lazy arm around the foot of the hill, there stands the old mill. Stone-built, moss-covered, its heavy wooden wheel turning ceaselessly. In the rushing current of the stream, it has stood there for longer than anyone remembers. Before the church was raised, before the market square was paved with cobblestones, before the hedgerows were clipped into neat fences, the mill turns, day and night, summer and frost, a steady heartbeat beneath the breath of the land. And inside, nestled against its humming walls, is the warm, flower-scented home of the miller and his wife. It is here, in this place of rhythm and grain, that a quiet ritual is about to unfold. One passed down through hushed voices and quiet kitchen shadows, from mother to daughter for more generations than anyone has counted. The miller's daughter, sweet Lena, has been ill for 3 days. Her forehead scorches to the touch, her breath catches in shallow gasps, and in the stillness of night, She whispers strange words that do not belong to this world. Names no one has taught her, phrases that stir unease in the hearts of those who hear. The village healer has come and gone. Poultices have been tried. Infusions of willow bark and wild thyme have been brewed. But still the fever lingers. And so, in the quiet hour before dawn, when the sky is only just beginning to change from indigo to grey, the miller's wife rises. She moves without waking her husband. The floors creak gently beneath her feet. In the kitchen, the last of the bread from the morning's baking rests in a linen-lined basket, still faintly warm. She selects the roundest, softest piece, a small, palm-sized loaf. Cradling it in both hands, she walks silently through the back door, across the dew-damp grass, to the stream behind the house. It runs fast here, fed by meltwater from the hills, always cold, always clear. She kneels at the edge, where the roots of the alder trees dip into the water like fingers, and for a long moment she just holds the bread. Her lips move in a prayer she learned as a child, a prayer never spoken aloud, only mouthed, only thought. Then, with fingers trembling, she sets the bread upon the water. This is the bread oracle, a ritual as old as the stones of the mill itself. If the bread floats, the sickness will lift, the child will live, the spirits will be appeased. But if it sinks, even slowly, even after a moment, then the illness will run its course. And there may be no returning. The stream will carry the answer. It is a sacred pact between earth and water, bread and breath, hope and surrender. The water connects this small village to the vast, unknowable world beyond, to the lakes where rain is born, to the sea where all rivers go, to the hidden depths where God or fate or something older still weighs the offerings of mortals. The miller's wife watches. The bread rocks gently, swaying in the current. At first, it dips, just a little. Her breath catches, her hands curl into her apron. Then, it rises, softly, fully, and begins to float, light and sure, drifting downstream like a tiny vessel, a messenger of hope. She watches it until it disappears around the bend. Not rushing, not panicked, just drifting, steady as the pulse of the world. A tear slips down her cheek, and with that she rises, her knees damp from the grass, and walks slowly back to the house. Inside, the room where Lena sleeps is still. The curtains flutter gently. The air smells of mint and firewood. The child stirs. Her eyes, which have been glassy and distant for days, blink open. She looks toward her mother, truly sees her, and whispers, "Mama?" Her voice is dry but clear. Her fever is gone. The miller's wife presses a kiss to her daughter's forehead, her heart full of something too wide for words. She says nothing of the stream, nothing of the bread. Some magic, she knows, must not be spoken of. It is too delicate, like frost on a spider web, too easily broken by disbelief or careless tongues. She carries the memory deep within her chest, a glowing ember tucked behind her ribs. Later that day, as the wheel continues to turn, as flour dust floats in golden beams through the millhouse windows, as Lena sleeps peacefully for the first time in days, the miller's wife bakes again. This time, she shapes a single small loaf into the form of a boat. She doesn't tell anyone why, but she places it on the windowsill to cool and watches the sunlight glint along its crust, smiling softly. And in the stream, far away, a simple piece of bread rides the current, toward the sea, carrying with it a mother's prayer, a child's second chance, and the quiet wisdom of those who understand that miracles often rise from the simplest things. As autumn deepens and the breath of the forest grows crisp and cold, the village turns quieter, slower, wrapped in shawls and soft lamplight. The air is filled with the scent of drying leaves and wood smoke, and frost begins to lace the edges of every window, like the delicate script of a language no one remembers how to read. And now, the bell tolls once more, a low, mournful sound that floats across the valley, settling gently into every heart. Old Jacob has died, the shepherd who once walked the hills with a staff of oak and a cloak worn smooth with time, whose voice used to rise in song above the wind, has taken his final breath. His family gathers around his bed, the fire burning low, the shadows long. There is no fear in the room, only sorrow, and something deeper still, reverence, because the moment after death, in this place and time, is sacred. It is when the veil is thinnest, when the living and the dead stand back to back, still close enough to touch. Jacob's eldest son, his hands calloused like his father's once were, reaches into a small leather purse, the same one Jacob wore every day, tied at his belt with a strip of twine. From within he draws out 2 copper coins aged and darkened by years of warmth and touch. With hands that tremble only slightly, he presses 1 coin upon each of his father's closed eyes. The metal is cold, the skin colder still, but this gesture is not born of fear. It is a gift, it is a promise. The coins are meant for the ferryman, that ancient figure who rows the boat across the shadowed river that separates this world from the next. Every soul must cross it. Some call it the Styx, others name it differently. In this village, it is simply known as the Black Water Dash, and it flows not in the land of maps, but in the realm of dreams and endings. The ferryman is old as time itself. He speaks no words, he simply waits, 1 hand on the oar, the other reaching, and he does not ferry those who cannot pay. The belief is ancient, older than the chapel, older than the candlelit prayers. A soul without payment cannot cross. It lingers at the shore, wandering in fog, trapped between the world it left and the world it cannot reach. And so, for generation after generation, the coins are given. 2 humble pieces of copper, more valuable in that moment than gold, placed on the eyes to guard the journey, to keep the gates open, to buy safe passage. Jacob's son imagines his father now, his spirit standing barefoot at the edge of the river, a thick mist curling around his feet. He holds the coins in his hand, waits in silence, and then, through the fog, a boat glides forward. Silent, slow. In it stands the ferryman, his face hidden in the folds of a shadowed hood. No words are exchanged, none are needed. Jacob offers the coins, the ferryman accepts, and the boat drifts away, carrying the shepherd toward the far shore. Back in the cottage, the women of the village have begun their sacred work. They wash Jacob's body with warmed water, using linen cloths and lavender from last summer's harvest. They dress him in his best woolen tunic, the one his wife once mended by hand, the one he wore to his eldest daughter's wedding. All is done gently, lovingly, no one speaks loudly, no one rushes. Death, in their world, is not a stranger. It is a returning, a passage, a second birth, and the coins stay upon his eyes as tradition demands. They are not moved, not removed, not questioned. They are his keys, his seal, his sacred toll. When the burial comes, Jacob is lowered into the earth with the coins still in place, his staff resting beside him, his old leather shoes tied neatly at his feet. The priest murmurs blessings, the family stands with bowed heads, and the wind whistles gently through the trees, as though carrying messages to places just beyond hearing. Later that night, Jacob's youngest grandson, no more than 7, asks his mother in a whisper, "Will he find the boat?" His mother smiles softly, kisses the crown of his head, and replies, "He already has." And somewhere in the quiet hills above the village, where Jacob once walked alone beneath the stars, a night breeze rustles the heather. It sounds almost like the dipping of oars. In distant water, the funeral is held on a grey morning, the kind that seems suspended in time. Neither night nor day, neither warm nor cold. The sky hangs low over the village, its clouds heavy with unspoken sorrow. A faint breeze rustles through the yew trees in the churchyard, but no birds sing. Even nature seems to mourn. Behind the church, where the grass grows soft and wild between leaning stones, the villagers have gathered. All of them. Some in dark cloaks, some with flowers clutched in trembling hands, some with nothing but silence pressed against their lips. Jacob's coffin, crafted by the village carpenter from thick oak and polished to a quiet sheen, rests beside the open grave. The scent of damp earth rises into the air. Somewhere in the distance, a dog begins to howl, low and long, before being hushed by a sharp voice. One by one, the villagers approach the coffin. Some bow, some cross themselves, some murmur a final farewell. But many, especially the elders, keep their distance. Their hands remain behind their backs, their gazes fixed not on the coffin, but on the grass beneath their feet. They remember the old warnings. Do not touch the dead. The phrase is passed down in whispers, the kind of lesson told not in books, but in moments. Around hearths, in hushed tones at bedsides, during wakes lit by a single flickering candle. They say death is not content to take just one. It lingers, a shadow clinging to hands, a breath carried on clothing, a whisper curling in hair. It watches for the soft-hearted, the ones who reach out in love and follows them home. Like smoke on wool, it is called the touch of death. That unseen stain that marks those who come too close, who dare to place a hand on the still chest or brush a final kiss to the brow. And the villagers have seen it happen. They remember the baker's wife, who wept openly when her mother passed, who held her hand too long as the bells rang for the funeral. She was dead within the week, then her baby, then her sister, one by one, like candle flames snuffed by the same cold wind. Only the baker survived, a man who now keeps salt in every window, who never enters the cemetery without gloves. So now they do not touch. They keep a respectful distance. They bow their heads, but their feet do not cross the line between reverence and risk. The grief is just as real, but it is held carefully, like a lantern in a storm. Young Sarah, Jacob's granddaughter, stands beside her mother, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Her boots are muddy, her hands are balled into fists at her sides. She wants desperately to lay her palm on the wood, just once, to say goodbye the way her heart aches to. She remembers how he used to lift her high onto his shoulders, to reach apples from the tree, how he tucked her in when her parents worked late, how he told stories by firelight that made her believe in magic and goodness and quiet strength. And now, he's gone. All she wants is to touch the smooth wood of the coffin just once, to feel that it is real, that he was real, that their love still matters. But her mother sees her reaching. Her hand snaps out, gripping Sarah's wrist like iron. No, she says, her voice sharp. And then softer, barely audible. Remember the baker's wife? And Sarah does. Everyone remembers, even children. She lowers her hand, nods slowly, and stands still as her grandfather is lowered into the ground. She does not touch, she does not speak, but her tears fall freely and soak into the earth at her feet. The only contact allowed now is between the living and the soil. Later that night, when the village has gone to sleep, Sarah sits at the foot of her bed and takes out the small pouch Jacob gave her last winter. Inside is the feather of a red robin, a smooth black stone, and a piece of twine. To keep you safe, he had said, even when I can't be there. She presses the pouch to her chest, and in the darkness, a quiet comfort settles over her. She didn't need to touch the coffin. He already touched her life, and that cannot be taken away. Far beyond the last row of cottages, past the low stone walls and the meadows dotted with wildflowers, the forest begins. Not the young, friendly woods where children gather berries in summer, but the deep forest. The old forest, where the trees grow tall and thick, and the light filters down in narrow gold threads, like sunlight spilled through cathedral windows. And in the heart of this forest, where the moss is soft as velvet, and the silence feels ancient and alive, an oak tree stands. Not just any tree, the villagers call it, the nail tree. Its trunk is broad, so wide that 3 grown men holding hands could not reach around it. Its bark is dark and furrowed, deeply grooved like the face of a wise old man, creased with the memories of centuries. But it is not the tree's size. That makes it holy. It is what lives within its bark. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of iron nails. Stud the surface, some rusted, some still shining, all hammered by hands both trembling and steady. They wind upward in quiet spirals, like constellations etched in metal, like a secret language of protection and prayer. The tradition is older than memory. When illness strikes without cause, when dreams turn dark, when hens stop laying and mirrors crack for no reason. The villagers know where to go. They take a single iron nail and walk, always in silence, to the forest's heart. There, beneath the wide arms of the nail tree, they press their fears into the ancient oak, and leave them there, buried beneath iron and bark. Iron, the old protector, the metal of truth and clarity. No demon can cross a line of iron. No witch's spell can survive its presence. Long ago it was said that the very bones of the earth were made of it, and that each nail hammered in was a signal. To the forces beyond the veil, you shall not pass. Today, the forest watches as a man approaches. A young father. His face is drawn with worry. His hands, rough with work, clutch a small nail wrapped in cloth. His wife lies at home, pale and restless, her pregnancy shadowed by unease. Each night she wakes with a cry. Each morning her dreams leave her trembling. He has heard the whispers, jealous eyes, unseen curses, old envy stirred like dust in the corners of village homes. He will not let superstition find her. He will meet it with something older, something stronger. He kneels before the tree. The clearing is silent but not empty. Birdsong has hushed. Wind has stilled. Even the moss beneath his knees feels expectant. He places the iron nail against the bark, finding a small space between two ancient offerings. The metal gleams faintly in the filtered light. Lifting his hammer, he begins to strike, once, twice, 3 times. The sound is soft, almost ceremonial. Metal meeting wood, fear meeting faith. With each strike, he whispers a plea. Protect them. Guard her nights. Let the child be born beneath a lucky star. The nail sinks deep into the oak's body. The bark, weathered and wise, seems to welcome it, folding slowly, gently, around the offering, as though saying, I will take this. You may rest. The man remains kneeling for a long time, his eyes closed, the hammer resting on his lap. Above him, the leaves rustle softly. Though there is no wind, it sounds almost like a blessing. He rises slowly, touches the tree once, not to harm, but to thank. Then he turns and walks the long path home, his heart lighter than it has been in weeks. Behind him, the nail tree stands in quiet dignity. Its iron wounds shine faintly in the fading light, each one a story, a cry, a hope. Together, they form a kind of armor, not just for the tree, but for the village itself. It has guarded them for generations, through sickness, war, famine, and fire. And it will guard them still, as long as there are nails and prayers, and those brave enough to believe in something older than fear. Night has come again to the village, draping its velvet cloak over thatched rooftops, and shuttered windows, wrapping each home in a hush as soft as snowfall. Inside, candles are being snuffed one by one, soup pots covered, fires banked, crickets tuning their songs beneath the floorboards. The village is drifting, not just into sleep, but into something older, deeper, where dreams blur the line between what is seen and what is sensed. But tonight, something presses against the edges of sleep. A sound, ancient and mournful, rises through the night air. From the high stone perch of the church bell tower, an owl calls out, dash, dash. A long, hollow cry. That seems to echo across the centuries. It is not just any owl, not one of the little barn owls that nest in eaves, nor the snowy ones that hunt the hills in winter. This is the church owl, the one with feathers the color of grave dust, eyes black as spilled ink, and a voice that travels like smoke into every dark corner. Its call is not a song. It is a summons, a warning, a whispered prophecy in feathers and breath, and the villagers know what it means. In dozens of cottages, people stir beneath their quilts. Old hands reach for prayer beads. Younger ones tighten arms around loved ones. Mothers cross themselves in the dark. Fathers press their lips to sleeping children's brows. It is said that when the owl calls from the church tower, someone in the village will die. Before the week is out, no one knows who. No one ever does. But someone's name has been softly spoken. On the other side, in the stone cottage closest to the tower, Martha lies awake. She has not lit a candle. She doesn't need one. She knows the dark. It has been her companion for many years, a quiet, watchful presence that asks for nothing, but teaches everything. She lies on her side, her silver hair tucked behind one ear, listening. The owl calls again, clear, measured, final, and she feels its echo, deep in her chest. She has heard it before, 3 times. Each time the cry came before loss, and each time the truth followed swiftly. The first time she was a young wife. Her husband had been healthy, sun-kissed and strong from working the fields. The owl called on a still, windless night. She had woken with a chill and heard the cry through the shutters, low and long, like a funeral bell spoken in feathers. Her husband died 2 days later, burning with fever so fierce it took the color from his eyes. The second time, her son had just turned 30. A father himself, he kissed her cheek the morning he left to trade grain in the next village. By dusk, he was gone, thrown from his horse on a dry, familiar road. He had ridden since childhood. She'd heard the owl again that week. It had cried 3 times. She had known. The third time, her daughter, still smiling, still strong, had gone to sleep and simply never woke. The owl's cry had been softer that night, as though even it mourned the gentleness of its message. Martha had lit a single candle at her bedside and waited. Now tonight, the owl calls once more. From the tower, high above the village, watching, listening, choosing. Martha does not flinch. She does not weep. She places her hand over her chest, where a small pouch of lavender and rosemary rests, tied there by her granddaughter just last week. To bring restful dreams, she thinks of the child's tiny fingers, the way she hummed as she tied the knot. She thinks of the rain barrels full for winter, of the apples drying in the loft, of her old cat asleep at her feet. All the small, precious things that make up a quiet life well lived. If the owl has called for her, then she is ready, not eager, but ready. She whispers a prayer, not for herself, but for the village, for the midwife with aching knees, for the boy with a limp who still dreams of dancing, for the woman who lights candles at dawn, for her husband lost at sea. Martha closes her eyes and listens one last time. The owl does not call again. In the stillness that follows, something shifts. Not in fear, not in sorrow, but in surrender. The kind of peace that only comes when you stop resisting the tide. Elsewhere in the village, others sleep restlessly. The owl's cry lingers in their minds, like the scent of smoke after a fire. They do not know who has been chosen. They only know that someone must go. But for tonight, their doors are closed, their beds are warm, and the ancient rhythm continues. Somewhere in the sky, the owl flies on, its wings stirring the stars, its voice fading into the folds of the night. And in a world that still remembers the wisdom of omens, its message has been heard. Dawn breaks gently over the village, not in a blaze of glory, but like a sigh, soft and silver, breathing across dew-covered rooftops and rippling through the mist that lingers between hedgerows and hollow paths. Usually, this is a peaceful hour when only the roosters crow and the sleepy cattle shuffle in their pens. But today, the air carries something heavier, a strange quiet, as though the land itself is holding its breath. The animals feel it first. Hens cluck nervously in their coops, horses refuse their oats, even the dogs are subdued, whining softly at closed doors, their ears pricked toward the forest. Something unseen is stirring, something that doesn't belong. At the heart of the village, in the cool shade of the churchyard yew trees, a small group has gathered. Their breath clouds in the morning chill. No one speaks above a whisper. In their midst stands Father Benedict, his white robe dusted with the damp of early light. Beside him, the village elders, grey-bearded and solemn, faces etched with the weight of old knowledge, and at the center of them all, Willem, a strong man, a good man. His hands, usually calloused with labor, now tremble slightly as he clutches a wooden cage. Inside, his finest rooster struts and pecks and lifts its proud red comb. Its feathers gleam like embers in the rising sun. It does not know what this day means. But the villagers do. They have seen the signs: crops yellowing before the harvest, milk turning sour overnight, children waking from dreams they do not understand, crying at the shadows in corners, goats miscarrying, tools breaking, voices heard where no one stands. The elders have whispered of it at night. A curse, not from any one person, but from a wound in the balance of things. A knot in the thread of life. Such forces require more than prayer. They require a sacrifice. This ritual is older than the church, older than any book or bell tower, a thread of knowledge kept alive in secret. By farmers, healers, and midwives. Even Father Benedict, who once denounced all pagan foolishness, has grown quiet in the face of the past month's darkness. Today, he turns his eyes from the altar and looks instead to the earth. A shallow pit has been dug at dawn beneath a tall oak whose roots drink deeply from the heart of the land. It is not large, not meant for a man, but deep enough for what must be buried. Willem kneels beside it, places the cage inside. The rooster clucks once, softly, its eyes blinking at the change in light. It does not panic. The ceremony begins. Each elder takes a turn with the shovel, dropping soil over the cage, slowly, softly, as if tucking a child beneath a blanket. And as they do, they speak aloud their fears. One by one, my son's leg will not heal. My wheat withers in the ground. I dream of fire and teeth. I have not slept in 7 nights. The earth receives their words, as it receives the sacrifice. Silently, patiently. Father Benedict speaks last. He does not use Latin. Instead, he says a line from a blessing that predates even scripture. Blood to bind, breath to cleanse. May what has been taken now be returned. He crosses himself, so do the villagers. The last of the dirt is pressed down, a stone is placed atop it. A flat one, marked with the shape of a circle and cross. The air shifts, not dramatically, not with thunder or wind, but gently, as though a weight has been lifted. From the chest of the village itself, even the birds begin to sing again, one by one. Willem walks home in silence, his hands empty now. The rooster, his proudest, his most beautiful, is gone. But it did not die for nothing. It died as a sentinel, a bridge between misfortune and healing, between the restless spirits and the living who must go on. In the weeks to come, the children's dreams become peaceful. The milk is sweet again. The wheat sprouts green and eager in the fields. No one speaks much of that morning, not openly, not in daylight, but in quiet moments when the breeze rustles the trees. And the animals grow still. A few of the elders glance toward the oak tree, toward the flat stone buried in roots. And they nod, as if to say, it was enough. Behind the stone cottage, where ivy curls along the window frames, and marigolds bloom in careful rows, the beehives sit like small temples. Painted in soft shades of ochre and pale blue, they line the garden fence, as they always have. A quiet congregation watching the seasons pass. But today they hum no hymns. Today they are silent. 3 days have passed since the old beekeeper drew his final breath. A soft death, peaceful, like a leaf falling from a branch in autumn. He died in his chair beneath the linden tree, with a smile still resting in the corners of his mouth and the scent of honey on his hands. Now the cottage feels too still, the garden too bare. And the bees, those sacred sisters, seem to wait for something. Not food, not sunshine. They wait for words. The beekeeper's daughter stands by the back door, holding a black veil in one hand, her other hand curled tightly around a sprig of rosemary. She has always feared this moment, not because she doesn't love the bees, she does, but because telling the bees is not a task to be taken lightly. It is not just a custom, it is a covenant. One whispered across centuries, by orchard keepers and widows, by herbalists and monks, by those who understand, that bees do not live entirely in this world alone. They are creatures of both blossom and breath. They serve the hive, yes, but also the unseen order of things. Her father had taught her this, patiently, year after year. Bees must be told of all that matters, he would say, births, marriages, illness, death, especially death. If they are not spoken to, they will leave, or worse. They will mourn so deeply, their honey will sour with sorrow. She steps down the garden path slowly, the morning dew soaking the hem of her dress, the air thick with lavender and grief. One by one, she approaches the hives. Each one is touched in turn. She knocks gently. 3 soft taps, just as her father did. The wood responds with a hollow echo, a sound that carries back into the earth and forward into the air. "Sisters, listen," she whispers, her voice low and reverent. "Your master is gone, he who rose before the sun and watched you dance in golden spirals. He who named you by your moods and sang you to sleep in winter has returned to the soil." She pauses, feeling her voice catch in her throat. The bees begin to stir, not angrily, not afraid, just listening. She lays the sprig of rosemary on the wooden landing board where the bees enter and leave. Then she speaks again. "But I am here. I will tend the garden, plant the thyme and the clover, keep your hives warm and your wax clean. I will greet you in the morning and tell you of the weather and never take your honey without thanks." And then, because it is tradition, she ties a black ribbon around each hive, a sign of mourning, so that the bees may grieve with dignity and know that their loss is honored. The hush that follows is not silence. It is sacred. It is full. It is the sound of 1,000 tiny wings, folding inward in understanding. Inside the hives, the bees begin to move again. Not frantically, but slowly, rhythmically, as if they are waking from a long, sad dream. By afternoon, they are flying once more. They drift toward the blooming hyssop, linger in the hollyhocks, and return to the hive with dustings of pollen. On their legs like golden prayers, the daughter stands at the window and watches them dance. Their circles, their waggle paths, their elegant messages written in air. She smiles through her tears. The bees have stayed, and though no one speaks of it aloud, some say that night they heard humming from the hives, not the usual drone of work and hunger, but something slower, like a song being remembered, a hymn of mourning, a lullaby for the soul of a beekeeper, a farewell written in wax and wings. It begins with a curdle, not all at once, but slowly, morning after morning, a creeping bitterness that seeps into the corners of Agnes's peaceful life, like frost creeping across a window pane. Her cows stand calm and untroubled in the early dawn, steam rising from their backs in the chill air, eyes soft and sleepy, tails flicking lazily. They give their milk as they always have, warm and white, heavy with promise. But before Agnes can even pour it into the clay jugs, it spoils, right before her eyes. The cream thickens, turns lumpy, the scent sours, sharp as vinegar, the liquid curdles in her pail, as if some invisible hand stirs it with malice. Now, in the pale blush of morning, Agnes stands in the village square, her apron damp with tears, her voice trembling like the leaves in the poplar trees above. The women of the village gather quickly. They know this story. They have heard it whispered in the shadows, told in kitchens and around fire hearths. In the hush of stormy evenings, sour milk is a sign. It is not a fault of cow or pail, nor the weather, nor the feed. It is the mark of a witch. "Every morning?" asks one woman, pressing her hand to her chest. "Even when the stars are clear," says another, her fingers gripping the well's wooden frame. Agnes nods. "Every morning, even when I sing to the cows like my mother taught me, even when I carry the milk carefully without spilling a drop, even when I pray." The women cross themselves. A few step back. Old Bridget, hunched with years, but sharp-eyed as a raven, steps forward, her voice low and certain. "It's the witch's mark," she says. "A curse, laid quiet and clever, like a spider's thread across a doorway. You don't feel it until it's already tangled around you." She touches Agnes's arm gently, as if to check for invisible signs. When a witch turns her eye upon your home, it doesn't just spoil your milk. It sours your luck, curdles your friendships, and thins the line between this world and the next. Whispers ripple through the crowd like wind on water. "The widow with the cats," murmurs one. "She was seen gathering mushrooms by moonlight." "What of the herb woman?" asks another. She walks the woods at dusk, talking to the trees. Or the dark-haired girl from the east, someone adds. She sings lullabies that sound like spells. No names are spoken aloud, but glances dart like wasps. Suddenly, a kind word given last week seems tinged with hidden meaning. A neighbor's silence becomes suspicious. A passing look now feels like an incantation. The village is no longer a circle of safety. It is a net of tangled doubt. Agnes stands in the center of it all, grief and guilt pulling at her like tides. It is her milk that soured, but now the whole village sours with it. She sees it clearly. How swiftly fear turns honey into vinegar. How quickly suspicion grows like mold in a root cellar. But Bridget, ever the guardian of old wisdom, leans close. Fear spreads fast, she says. But so does protection, if you know where to look for it. She reaches into her pouch and draws out a twist of iron, cold and black, shaped like a nail. Hammer this into the doorframe of your dairy, then scatter salt at every corner and hang fresh rowan above the pails. Speak the old words, and not just with your mouth, but with your heart. The witch's eye cannot linger, where the light is strong. So Agnes does as she's told. That night, beneath the watchful eye of the moon, she enters the dairy alone. The air is thick with silence. The smell of spoiled milk lingers in the corners. Like a warning, she kneels on the stone floor, her hands trembling, her prayers whispered like lullabies. She drives 3 nails into the walls. One for the cow, one for the cream, and one for the truth. She circles the threshold with salt, lays a sprig of rosemary by the window, and places her palm over the milk pail, whispering the name of every ancestor she can remember. The next morning, when she lifts the pail beneath her gentlest cow, the milk flows sweet and clean. Smooth as moonlight, rich as memory, she breathes a prayer of thanks. But she does not speak too loudly of her success. She does not name the one who cursed her. That, she knows, is not her place. The witch may still be watching. But now, so is she. And more than that, she remembers her grandmother's voice. The strongest protection is not always loud. Sometimes it is a quiet woman, kneeling in a dairy at midnight, holding a nail in one hand, and a prayer in the other. The afternoon light is honeyed and soft, slanting through the narrow windows of the weaver's cottage, where threads hang like cobwebs across a wooden frame, and dust motes dance slowly in the golden air. Anna sits at her loom, her bare feet working the treadles below, her hands moving with the calm repetition of long practice. The shuttle flies in and out like a sparrow, and the pattern beneath her fingers begins to take shape. A new tablecloth woven with sky-blue thread, meant to be part of her dowry. Outside, a gentle breeze stirs the garden herbs. Inside, the only sounds are the soft clack of the loom, the rustle of warp threads shifting, and the low hum of Anna's voice, singing an old melody her grandmother taught her, about a swan who waited too long for spring, and then the shuttle slips, not because she misses, but because her hands have stilled. Something dash, a flicker in the corner of her eye, has pulled her out of rhythm. She turns her head, and there, in the doorway between the kitchen and the sitting room, stands herself. Exactly herself. Same dress, faded blue linen with a tear at the hem. Same braid over the shoulder, same eyes, same hands, same anxious crease between her brows. Same dirt smudge on her cheek from fetching wood that morning. The room seems to narrow, time slows. Anna doesn't speak. Neither does her double. They simply look at each other, as though caught in a mirror's gaze. But this is no mirror. This other Anna breathes. She blinks. And then, without a word, she turns and walks away, disappearing into the drowsy gold of the afternoon. The silence that follows is unbearable. Anna's hands tremble as they return to her lap. Her breath is shallow, her pulse erratic. It feels as though something important has shifted, as if the world has tilted, just a little, on its axis. She sits for a long while, staring at the empty doorway, until the quiet becomes too loud, and the shadows too long. For what she has seen is no dream. She has seen her doppelganger, her double, her echo, her soul's reflection. And every child in the village knows what that means. She remembers, as clearly as yesterday, the story her grandmother used to tell, about the spring day she saw herself in the orchard gathering apples from a tree that had not yet borne fruit. 3 days later, she was dead. A peaceful passing, yes, but a certain one. And there were others, so many others. A miller who met his double by the stream, just before he was caught beneath his millstone. A merchant who saw himself walking into his own shop and never returned home. A midwife who glimpsed her reflection in the church window. After all the shutters had been drawn, it is always the same. The double appears. When death draws near, Anna rises to her feet, her knees weak beneath her. She does not think. She only moves 0, grabs her shawl from the hook, and walks barefoot down the road. To the village church, her braid swings like a pendulum against her back. As she hurries, inside the old stone chapel, candles flicker like nervous hearts. The scent of wax and lilies clings to the air. Father Benedict, kneeling by the altar, looks up as Anna enters, breathless and pale. She tells him everything. Her voice shakes. Tears streak her cheeks. She whispers of mirrors that breathe, of eyes that match her own, of footsteps that echo before they fall. The priest listens. Kindly, gravely. When she is done, he places a hand upon her shoulder. "I have heard of such things," he says softly. "And I will not lie to you, child. The stories are many. But there is another way to look at it." She looks up, eyes wide and fearful. "What if," he says, "your double is not here to warn you of death, but to remind you to live?" Anna frowns, confused. Perhaps it is not a doom. Perhaps it is a mirror held up by heaven itself. A sign to pay attention. To mend what is broken, to say what must be said, to love while you still can. The words settle into her like seeds. She does not speak again, but she kneels beside him as he lights a candle and prays for her soul. Not in fear, but in hope. That evening, Anna returns home. The sun has dipped below the hills, and the light in the cottage is soft and amber. She places her hand gently on the loom, but does not resume her weaving. Instead, she walks to her mother's room and kisses her on the forehead. She sets an extra place at the table and hums an old lullaby as she ladles soup into bowls. That night, she writes a letter to a friend she has not spoken to in years. She opens the window before sleep to let in the air and the moonlight. And when she lies down to rest, she does not fear her dreams, for the double may return, or it may not. But if it does, it will find her ready, not resigned, not trembling, but awake, and wide-eyed and grateful for every breath that still remains. At the farthest edge of the village, where tilled earth gives way to wild bramble, and the last stalks of grain bow toward the woods, there stands a figure in the field. He is tall, lean-limbed, his head a simple sack, stitched with black thread into the suggestion of a smile. He wears a faded checked shirt, brown wool trousers patched at the knees, scuffed boots with cracked soles, and atop his head, a cap, grey with time and clinging to its shape like memory itself. To most, he is a scarecrow. But to the people of this village, he is more than straw and wood, more than a warning to crows. He is Henrik. Henrik the farmer died last winter, in the deep hush of January, when the fields were sleeping beneath a quilt of snow, and the stars hung like frost in the branches of the sky. He had lived a quiet life, honest and steady, his hands shaped by soil, his back bent from decades of harvest. When he passed, his family grieved quietly, the way farmers do. They buried him with bread and cider, and with seeds in his pocket, so that even in death he might offer growth. But when the time came to part with his belongings, his beloved shirt, his boots, his cap, they could not let them go to the grave. Not yet. Instead, they carried the garments to the boundary of the fields and dressed the scarecrow, the one Henrik himself had built years ago, before his hands grew stiff with age. And in doing so, they offered him a place to stay. The transformation was subtle at first. The crows that had once jeered and swooped now circled wide, silent and uneasy. The fields grew calm, as if soothed by the presence that had returned to them. The air felt different near the scarecrow. Warmer somehow, even on cool mornings. Children walking to school claimed the figure turned its head to watch them pass. One swore she heard it whisper, "Mind the thistles, child," just as her foot nearly found a patch of nettles. At first, people laughed, but not unkindly. Then came the stories. A farmer swore he saw the scarecrow lift one arm as a storm cloud gathered in the east, and minutes later the cloud broke apart. Another found a fallen fence mended overnight, though no neighbor had taken credit. A lost lamb wandered back home in the night, muddy but unharmed. And some said they saw a tall figure guiding it from the edge of the wood. Henrik, it seemed, had returned, not in flesh, but in something deeper, a soul, perhaps. Still tethered to the earth he loved, still watching the rows of wheat, still walking the borders at twilight, still standing at the place where the wild meets the cultivated. They say he walks only under moonlight, when mist curls low and pale moths flit through the barley. Travelers on the old road claim to see a figure, moving through the grain without breaking a single stalk, stopping now and then to kneel, as if examining the roots. Children dare each other to approach the scarecrow at dusk, but none get too close. Not because they are afraid, but because something deep inside tells them to show respect. One girl left a flower crown at his feet. By morning, it had been placed gently on his shoulder. The priest, Father Benedict, does not comment on such things. But when he walks past the field, he always doffs his cap and says quietly, "Peace to you, Henrik." No one dares replace the scarecrow's clothes, though they've grown threadbare. The shirt flaps weakly in the wind. The boots are worn down to their stitching. The cap has lost its shape, but no one touches them. Because these things belong not just to Henrik, but to the land. The scarecrow stands through the changing seasons. In spring, he watches the planting. In summer, he guards the growing. In autumn, he overlooks the harvest. And in winter, as snow drapes gently over his shoulders, like a cloak of remembrance, he remains still, a lone sentinel beneath a pale sky. Henrik's family no longer mourn. They visit the field in quiet gratitude. Sometimes they sit at the edge and talk aloud as though the man they loved is still listening. And perhaps he is. Because the earth holds memory in its roots. Because the soul, when deeply tied to a place, does not always leave it behind. And so the scarecrow remains. A watcher, a bridge, a spirit stitched not into linen or leather, but into the very grain that feeds the village. And long after the scarecrow's arms fall and his cap blows away across the fields, the wind will still whisper Henrik's name among the wheat, and something unseen will answer. As the sun begins its slow descent beyond the hills, the sky turns to gold, then rose, then deepening indigo. Shadows stretch across the rooftops, spilling from chimneys and window ledges, chasing the chickens into their coops and drawing the children reluctantly indoors. And then, just as the first star appears, the bells begin to ring. Their sound rises slowly, deep and solemn at first, like a voice waking from slumber. One by one, the tones unfurl into the sky, echoing down the narrow lanes, over the fields, and across the wooded hillsides. The bells of St. Agnes. Bronze-tongued and hollow-hearted, their sound is anything but empty. To the villagers, it is the sound of sanctuary, the sound of warding, of protection. Tonight, their ringing carries more than time. It carries a plea, for the plague has returned. That terrible illness, the Black Death. A curse with no form, no face, no mercy. It has been seen again in the villages east of the valley. The black banners are rising on cottage doors. The air in some towns, it is said, hangs heavy with rot and incense. The carts roll slowly down the cobbled streets, loaded with the still forms of neighbors, lovers, children. And though the disease has not yet come to this village, its shadow has. And so the bells are rung. At the top of the bell tower, Father Benedict stands alone in the rising dark, his fingers wrapped around the thick frayed ropes. With each pull, the great iron tongues strike bronze. With each strike, sound rolls outward. Not just noise, but blessing. The bells were forged long ago, poured in sacred fire, blessed by bishops, anointed with oils carried from distant monasteries. Silver was stirred into the molten bronze, coins donated by widows and paupers alike. Because even the poor understood, the bells protect. Their vibrations cleanse the air, scatter demons, frighten death itself. So says the old belief. And tonight, belief is all they have. In the village below, the people listen. They pause at hearth and barn door, cups mid-air, hands stilled on spades and bread loaves. The ringing wraps around them. Not loud, not harsh, but like a great slow heartbeat in the sky. Even the animals seem to listen. Cows in their stalls lift their heads. Birds settle without song. A dog whimpers, not from fear, but as if recognizing something old and holy in the sound. Mothers whisper prayers as they draw salt lines at their thresholds. Fathers place sprigs of rosemary above doorways, their hands trembling as they do. Some begin to sing. Low, quavering hymns passed down from plague years past. Deliver us, O Lord, from death sudden and unseen. Children, sensing the tension without understanding its weight, press their hands to their hearts, as the bells toll above them like giants' voices. Long ago, before the church stood here, there was a single iron bell hung from a post, rung when wolves were seen at the edge of the forest. It is said that even then, the sound turned predators back. But it was in plague years, especially the Black Death of the 1300s. That bells took on a power greater than protection. They became guardians, mediators, weapons against the unseen. And so Father Benedict does not pause, even when his arms ache, even when his hands blister, even when the moon rises behind him like a ghost in the window. He rings. Each peal is a defiance, each echo a wall, each vibration a barrier between his flock and the creeping dark. He does not know if it works, but he believes, and belief in these times is the strongest thread they have. When at last the bells fall silent, the sky is dark, the village is still. A mist curls in the low hollows of the fields, the torches burn low on the main road, the sound of insects resumes softly in the hedgerows, but the fear is quieter now, not gone, never truly gone, but muffled and as if wrapped in wool and tucked away behind a wall of prayer. That night, the villagers sleep with windows closed and candles lit. Salt glimmers in thin lines across their doors. Dried herbs hang in bunches from rafters. And though their dreams may carry hints of darkness, they wake, in the soft grey light of dawn, to find their breath steady, their children whole, their village untouched. The bells have spoken, and for now that the plague has passed them by. As our long night of stories draws to a close, dear listener, I find myself growing drowsy here by the dying fire. The flames, once tall and bright, now flicker low, their golden tongues retreating into ash, like tired eyes slowly closing after a long and thoughtful day. The candles have burned down to their final stubs, wax pooling around their bases like small lakes of forgotten time, and the shadows gather, not to frighten us, but to wrap us gently, like a soft woolen blanket drawn up beneath the chin. We have wandered far together tonight, you and I, through mist-covered forests and fields brushed with frost, past cottages scented with rosemary and wood smoke, into churches where bells still ring against invisible threats, and deep into the hidden places of the human heart, where superstition and faith live side by side, holding hands like old friends. We have moved softly through the medieval world, a world lit not by electricity, but by firelight and memory, where the night was long, the winters harsh, and life itself often uncertain. And yet, there was tenderness in that world. There was love. These superstitions, these gentle beliefs, were not born of ignorance. They were born of care. The witch bottles, the fairy rings, the offerings of bread, they were all small acts of love, little spells cast not with wands or wizards, but with flower-dusted hands and whispered prayers. They were how our ancestors held back the darkness, how they kept their children safe, how they made sense of the unknowable, and how they remembered that they were not alone. Think of Margot with her bottle of pins, burying her fears beneath the floorboards to protect her sleeping child. Think of the miller's wife, watching a piece of bread float downstream, her faith as fragile as the crust, and just as brave. Think of the beekeeper's daughter, tapping gently on the hive, her voice trembling as she whispered the death of her father to creatures who understand sorrow in ways we may never truly grasp. Think of the scarecrow, walking the fields beneath a harvest moon, his straw-filled boots stepping carefully between the rows of wheat, still tending the land he loved in life. These were not just superstitions, they were rituals of remembrance. They were acts of love, each nail in the oak tree, each pinch of salt on the doorstep, each line drawn in ash across a brow. They were all small lights against the night. In our modern world, we live surrounded by brightness, electric and instant. But still, the ancient shadows sometimes find their way in. And maybe, just maybe, there's something to be learned from those who came before us, from those who watched the wind for omens, and covered mirrors after a death, and listened for the owl's cry at midnight. They understood something we sometimes forget, that the world is still full of mystery, that every knock at the door might carry a hidden meaning, that every dream might be a message, that every act of kindness, offering bread, lighting a candle, singing a lullaby, could ripple through the unseen world like a prayer whispered into water. So perhaps tonight, as you drift towards sleep, you will carry with you these stories. You will remember the villagers, the blacksmith's apprentice, the priest in the tower, the young girl who saw her double in the doorway. And you will think of them not as relics of the past, but as fellow travelers, each one doing their best to love, to hope, to survive. We are not so different after all. We want our homes to be safe. We want to protect our children. We want to believe that love lasts even after death. And so did they. The fire is almost out now. The coals glow like sleepy stars. The bells have rung their last note for the evening. The village sleeps, blanketed in salt, watched over by iron, cradled in the hush of holy bells and whispered spells. You too may rest now. Let your dreams carry you gently across the centuries, through fields of silver wheat and cottages of stone, where bread speaks of hope and bees remember the dead. Let the old ways soothe you. Let the fading light carry you to peace. For though the story ends here, dear listener, the magic goes on, woven into the fabric of every ordinary moment, waiting to be remembered, waiting to be seen. Sleep well, and may your dreams be blessed with wonder.